Hey, what is going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and in this video we are going to be revisiting the almighty PlayStation Vita for the first time in a while here. This is going to be for firmware 3.73, as this has been the most recent firmware for a long time at this point, but this is kind of just a revisiting tutorial, and I'm going to be showing you all how you can take your own PlayStation Vita, Vita TV, or PlayStation TV, and hopefully get the most out of it, just getting all up and running here if you have not modified your system. The goal of this video is going to be to take your system, which is on firmware 3.73, modify it, downgrade it to a better firmware, which is 3.60, and I'll be explaining that once we get there, remodding your system, and then getting a permanent setup, as well as a brief overview of getting plugins set up and a few other things. This is not going to cover all of the awesome stuff that you can do with your Vita. A couple examples of things that are not covered in this tutorial will be setting up Adrenaline to fully unlock the ePSP emulator, or even using something such as Storage Manager to replace your memory card on your Vita so you can then use a much bigger and cheaper micro SD card in its place. However, I do have videos covering those two specific topics and more. This video is going to be a tutorial showing you all how to modify your Vita and hopefully get it into the best state you can, but it's really just going to build that foundation, and then you can go beyond that if you wish to, which I would recommend because there's a lot of really awesome stuff that you can unlock in the Vita once you modify it. Now, there is going to be a few requirements that we're going to need to get started. First of all, you are going to need your PlayStation Vita, whether that is a 1000 model, a 2000 model, a PlayStation TV, or a Vita TV. From this point out, regardless of which system you have, I'm going to refer to them as a PlayStation Vita or a Vita, just to make it simple. For this tutorial, I'm using a PlayStation TV, but that is mostly just to capture all the footage on here. The process is really going to be the same between either the TV systems or the handheld systems. Next up, you are going to need internet access on hopefully a Windows-based PC, as well as your PlayStation Vita. And you're going to need a PlayStation Network account already set up, established, and logged in on your PlayStation Vita. The last thing here is you will need storage. Now, if you have a PlayStation Vita 2000 model or a PlayStation TV or a Vita TV, you have 1 GB of storage built in, and as long as you have just enough storage space for all the stuff we're going to be doing here, I recommend allocate about 150-200 megabytes for just this overall. You should be fine. However, if you do not have a memory card and you have a PlayStation Vita 1000 model, you have to get a memory card in order to finish this process. So with all of that here, first let's go ahead and go over to our Vita and let's fire up our settings and just take a look at a few things. First of all, I am going to go down to my system and check the system information. As you can see, my Vita here is on System Software 3.73, which at the time is the latest version, and that is what we're going to be using for this tutorial. One thing to keep in mind, if you're on any firmware higher than 3.60, I'd recommend getting up to firmware 3.73 for this. If you are on any firmware lower than 3.60, I would recommend updating to 3.60, and you can jump in on this tutorial to the firmware 3.60 part. What I'm saying here is 3.60 is the best firmware to be on, and that is one of our end goals for our system right here. So we will be going through all of that. If you are needing to update your system at all, I will also have another video covering that. All the links for the software you will need will be linked down below in the description of this video, but the first thing we're going to be using is Final h-encore. This is going to allow us to actually modify the system itself. So once you click on the GitHub page, you can scroll over, find the Releases tab, and download the latest release. This is pre-compiled for Windows and it is a 7-zip file. If you need a method of extracting this file, you can download and install 7-zip, which is free and easy enough to do. Great, so with all of this set up here, we're just going to right-click and extract this into its own directory. You should have your own Final HE directory right here, and inside of this, you can just click on Final HE, double-click it, and it should bring this screen up, which is pretty simple and easy enough to understand. If at any point you get a Windows firewall prompt, make sure you allow access because we will need this to communicate with our Vita. Well, at this point here, it's just telling us to launch Content Manager on the Vita and connect to computer. So you have two methods of connecting up your Vita. You can either use USB or you can connect over your network. Now, if your computer that you're using as well as your PlayStation Vita are on the same internet network in your house, you'll be able to use the network option, which is what I will use for this tutorial. If you have the handheld system, you'll be able to connect through USB. I have not had much luck with it using the PSTV over USB. It just has not worked for me, and I don't believe it does. However, if you do this on the handheld system, you have either of those options. But if you'd like to just follow along with the network option, that's what I'm going to show you. While you have Final h-encore running over on your Vita, you want to go down to Content Manager and fire up Content Manager. From here, you'll want to go down to Copy Content and enter that. Now you need to select the device to connect to. For this, we'll be using a PC. And for here, you can register your device. So this is my PC that I'm connecting to. Press X. And now there is going to be a number that you're going to need to enter here. If you've never done this before, it should now show your PlayStation Network ID as well as a PIN to input on your Vita. Just enter in that PIN. Once this is entered, you can hit X on register, and it will now say the device is registered. It should reconnect. And once we get to a screen like this, we are good. Let's go back over to our computer. Over at Final h-encore, it should show your PlayStation Vita's information, and if it does, congratulations, you are all good at this point. You've done the harder part, which is just getting connected here. So now we can just enable trim h-encore to 7 MB, that's what I would recommend, and click on Let's Go. Just let it do its thing. It's going to download the package file we need and do the rest of the magic here. Excellent, at this point this is done. It has the instructions here, but I'm going to show you what to do on the Vita as well. Over on the console, go to Copy Content and highlight PC to your PS Vita or PSTV system. Go into Applications, go into PS Vita under Applications, and find h-encore². If this does not show up, you might have to close out of the Content Manager and open it up again, and the same goes for if you try and copy it over and it ends up failing. But what you want to do is make sure you select this so you have it checked, go down to Copy, press OK, and wait a few moments. And here we go, that's all done. So now you can press the PlayStation button, exit out of the Content Manager, and if you go over to your apps, you should have h-encore² showing up right there. Over at Final h-encore, you can close out of this because we do not need this application running anymore. So awesome, we have the magical application we need here. Go ahead and fire up h-encore like any other application. If you get this error saying you cannot start trophies, you want to say yes, and just wait. If you get a crash and your Vita restarts, that's fine, just go ahead and try this again. Same thing as before. Now, I did not touch anything, but as you can see, if it's successful, you come to the h-encore bootstrap menu. So at this point, the first thing you want to do is go down to Install HENkaku and press X on this to install it. Next up, go to Download Vita Shell. Same thing, press X to download and install it. And there we go. We can now press X on exit. And we are all good. We now have a new application here called Vita Shell. And if we do, that is great. We are on the right path so far. However, to continue on with this, we will need to go over to our settings. You should now see a new option up top called HENkaku Settings. From here, you can go into HENkaku Settings. I'd recommend enable PSN spoofing. We do need to enable unsafe homebrew, and you can do enable version spoofing as well, if you wish. We're going to be changing this anyways. So now, technically, our Vita is modded. We have the ability to launch homebrew and do all the stuff we want to, but these newer firmwares are a bit limited in what they can do, which is why we're needing to get to the 3.60 firmware. So we're now going to begin the downgrading process. For this, make sure, again, your system has been up and running, you've already run h-encore², and you have installed HENkaku on here. So you can now go down to Vita Shell and hopefully launch your very first piece of Homebrew. It might take a little bit to come up, but the first time it comes up here, it should look a little something like this. Now at this point, we do need to connect back to our PC. So if you press the Start button, you can go down here, and where it says Select button, if you're going to be connecting through USB and setting this up like a USB drive and transferring some files over, you're welcome to do that. However, we're going to be using FTP and doing this on the network, at least in this tutorial here. So I'd recommend changing this to FTP, press the circle button, and then press the Select button. When you press that button, FTP server is now going to be running. You're going to see a set of numbers here for an IP address as well as a port. Keep this up and running, make sure your Vita stays on, and stay at this screen. We're going to need that IP address as well as 1337. With that all running, go back over to your PC. For this process, we're going to need three things. First of all, we need a FTP client. For this, I will be using WinSCP. We will also need the 3.60 PS Vita firmware. You can just download this from Softpedia. Finally, we're going to need Modoru, which will most likely be your second piece of PS Vita Homebrew. So for this, we can go ahead and come to the Modoru page, go up to Releases, and download the latest release, which is a VPK file. Now, after you have your FTP client installed, you should have your VPK downloaded, as well as another file, which is going to be this PSV updat.pup file. And if you cannot see the file name extensions on here and you're using Windows, you can click on View and enable file name extensions. That's going to be really important. First, let's get this renamed. We're going to have to rename this to PSP2 updat.pup. It should look exactly like that. The second thing I'd recommend you do is check your MD5 hash with this. Now there's going to be a set of random numbers and letters, and I'm going to have this linked down below in the description just so you can copy and paste it out. But you're going to want to take that string of numbers and letters, copy it, and we're going to run this through a MD5 checker. For this, I like to use Online MD5, another website here which should be easy enough to utilize. Click on Choose File, select your PSP2 updat.pup file, make sure MD5 checksum is ticked right here, and now once that is done, you can paste in with compare with, do a compare, and if everything matches up and you get this green check mark, congratulations, you have downloaded a properly downloaded and non-corrupt copy of this update. This is the 3.60 update. Now when you open up your FTP client, you'll want to go to a new site and go to FTP, make sure FTP is selected, no encryption, enter in your IP address, enter in 1337 for the port number, and enable anonymous login. Remember, this should currently be running on your PlayStation Vita right now on that screen from Vita Shell. It should have your IP address as well as the port number on hand. Once you have that all set up, you can also click on Save, and you can save this as a system that you can easily access here. Once you have that all set up, click on Login. If these folders show up on the right, congratulations, you have connected to your Vita. So at this point here, you want to go into the UX0 directory, and I'd recommend making a new folder here. You can just right click, create a new directory, and call it something like VPK. And inside of the VPK directory, this is where we're going to transfer our files. On the left, you're going to want to navigate to where you have saved these, whether it be a specific folder or your desktop, for example, but you want to just right click on Modoru, upload, press OK. And the same thing for PSP2 updat. Press OK on here. This is going to take a little bit longer, and it also depends on your network speed, so just wait a minute or two. So now once that's all transferred over, you can close out of WinSCP, and now you can go over to your Vita. Over at the Vita, press circle to cancel, and now your FTP server should be closed. And now you'll have to get this installed. So to install Modoru, you want to go all the way down to UX0, go all the way down to our VPK directory, highlight modoru.vpk, press X, and press Yes to install the package. Now, we'll bring up a warning, just make sure you understand this, and if you do agree, you can continue on, and this will install Modoru. Once that's installed, you can press the triangle button while highlighting Modoru, go down to delete, and yes. And next up, we're going to transfer our update file. So while highlighting PSP to updat.pup, you can press the triangle button, go down to move, press X, press OK, that you've seen it's copied even though it's moving. Now you can press circle. You can now go all the way up. While you're in UX0, go to app and enter the app folder. Go down to Modoru 000. Press X. And now while highlighting the two dots, you need to press the triangle button and press X on paste. So there we go, we have that transferred over. Go up to the top and press the two dots here. Press X. We're going to do the two dots again. Press X yet again on them. And now make sure again that you are in the UX0 directory. Since you're in UX0, again, make note of that. At the very top left, it should say UX0. If you're in UX0, you want to go down to tie, press the triangle button on the tie directory, go down to delete, and press X. And there we go. So now with all that done, we can press circle. Let's press the PlayStation button, and we're going to exit out of Vita Shell. And what I'd recommend doing here, or really not even recommend, just you do have to do this, is to completely restart your device. So make sure you go over, turn off your device, and turn it back on. Once your device has been restarted, you want to scroll down, go over to h-encore², press X, and boot this up like any other application. Once it loads, go down to install HENkaku, press X, and then press X on exit. Now you want to go over to your settings, and up at the top we should see HENkaku settings. Go into HENkaku settings, go all the way down, and what we're going to do is unlink our memory card. It will say that this memory card can now be used on any Vita, and that is what we are looking for. Press OK, exit out of here. And I would recommend, just for good measure, restart your system one more time. Now that your system has restarted, yet again, you're going to want to go down to h-encore², fire this up, say yes, go down to exit, well, press X on exit, and now once that has run, you're going to want to go down to Modoru. Now before we run this here, since I'm on a PlayStation TV, it doesn't matter too much, but if you are on a PlayStation Vita handheld, you're going to want to make sure your system has been charged up before you do this procedure, and you also want to keep it plugged into a charger, because we do not want to disconnect power at all while we are downgrading our firmware. This is easily the most dangerous part of this process and can render your system useless and bricked. So let's go ahead and fire this up if you're all ready to go. So with Modoru, go ahead and launch it, press start, or X on here. Now you are going to get some notes here saying our current firmware version, our factory firmware version, meaning that is the lowest our system can go, as well as our target. Your target should say 3.60, and hopefully it does. If your factory firmware is higher, you will not be able to downgrade, unfortunately. However, since this system does work for firmware 3.60, we can downgrade to that 3.60 firmware. Since we are going to confirm, you can go ahead, confirm. Now there is going to be a warning here on screen. Make sure you read this thoroughly and understand it. Once you have agreed to these terms, you can go ahead, continue. This is just going to do its own thing. At this point, put your system down, put your controller down, do not touch it until the process is complete. It should exit out of Modoru automatically and bring you to this system update screen. Again, do not touch anything, just wait and let it do its own thing. Now once that is all done, your console should reboot, and if it does, we should be all good to go at this point. So you can now go ahead and grab your console here, we're going to go down to our settings, go all the way down to system, go to system information, and as you can see, our system software is 3.60, so we have successfully downgraded our system. However, at this point here, we do need to remod our system. This is awesome that we've had it downgraded, but it must be remodded. So one of the first things that we can do here is actually get rid of h-encore² because we are not going to need it. So I'm just going to go ahead, get rid of that, press circle there, and now we're going to need to go to our internet browser on our Vita. Once it's open, go to select here to enter an address, press X, and the website we will be going to is going to be HENkaku.xyz. And it's going to be spelled exactly like this. Once that's all entered, go ahead, go to the website. From here, it's pretty simple. You just go to install, the orange install button, press X, and now make sure yet again that you are going to read this warning and thoroughly understand it. If you do agree to it, you can go ahead and install this. Even though this does work well, it might not work the first time around, so if it doesn't work properly, just go ahead, close out the browser, reopen it, and try yet again. If you're still running into some issues with the browser, we might have to try a few other things. For this, you can open up the browser itself, go to the three dots, go down to settings, we're going to delete our cookies, clear search history, nothing in security, that's all fine. Exit out of your browser, and it wouldn't hurt to restart the system and try again. One thing to note with this error is you do want the progress bar to get up to 100%. Once it gets up to 100%, you can press the OK button and you should hopefully be able to continue. And there we go. You might have to press OK a few times, but once you do get in there, it should take over your browser. You should get a screen like that. And now, at this point, we should be all good to go. Now, unfortunately, it looks like we don't have molecular shell right here, so we will need to take one extra step with setting that up. Go ahead, restart your console if you don't see molecular shell, and try here again. Once this happens here, press the R1 button on a controller or the right shoulder button on your Vita. You should get a few extra pieces of information here. And here we go. So at this point, it should exit out. And if we scroll down, check this out, we now have molecular shell. So you can go into molecular shell, fire it up, and it should look a little something like Vita shell. And if it does, congratulations, you do have HENkaku now installed. Your Vita is technically modded yet again, and you are able to run HomeBrew and do all the fun stuff you want. Now, just like before, we're going to press the PlayStation button, exit out of here, go up to our settings, enter our settings, and up at the top, we should have HENkaku settings. Go to HENkaku settings, make sure enable unsafe HomeBrew has been enabled, and that's about all we need right here for now. So we can press circle, close out of settings, and continue on to installing Ensō. As opposed to firing up our Vita, turning it on from coldboot, and either running h-encore or molecular shell and doing an install every single time, we're going to now set this up with Ensō, meaning that you will be able to just boot up your Vita from coldboot and it is modded right from the get-go. Kind of similar to how custom firmware on a PlayStation 3 works or any other coldboot modification for a system. For this, make sure you have Vita shell available. We're going to go ahead, fire this up. And just like before, we're going to press the select button. And we should now have our FTP server up and running. keep your Vita on. Make sure your FTP server is available here because we will need it when we go to our computer. Alright, so really to get you all up and running in the best and probably simplest way possible, there's going to be 3 final pieces of Homebrew that I would recommend downloading and installing. The first one is going to be Ensō, which this is going to allow us again to get our permanent HENkaku set up. The links for all of these GitHub repositories are going to be down below in the description. But the first one, Ensō, you can click on this, go to the releases, and download the latest enso.vpk file. Second is going to be AutoPlugin 2. The way HENkaku works is it really allows you to customize it and add your own plugins. So you have the stock firmware, you put HENkaku on top of that, and then you add all your plugins to it. So for this, I find this to be the easiest and, in my opinion, best way to set up your plugins here, just because it's so simple to do. But you can go to the AutoPlugin 2 repository, go to releases, and download the latest release for AutoPlugin 2. Finally, if you want to get into the awesome world of Homebrew and easily download some new pieces of Homebrew, you can download the Vita Homebrew browser. Yet again, go down to the GitHub repository page, go to releases, and download the latest release. Back over at our PC, let's go ahead, start a new session with the FTP server running. Make sure you connect like before, and make sure, again, we're not going to go in here, but we are going to go to the UX0 directory and the VPK directory. And here you need to find where you have saved your files, but we're going to transfer over all of our new VPKs. So we're going to be doing AutoPlugin 2, Ensō, and Vita HB browser if you've chosen to get all 3 of them. Just make sure you select all of them, upload, and wait a few seconds. With all of that done, we can close out of WinSCP yet again and go back to the Vita. Over at the Vita, press circle to cancel. Now go down to UX0 and enter the UX0 directory. Go all the way down to VPK, enter the VPK directory, and from here we're going to be installing all of these. So you can just like before, highlight, press X, make sure you understand what you're doing here, and install all 3 of these applications. So now with all of these installed, we can just go in and delete each one of them. With all our VPK files deleted, we can now close out of Vita Shell, go back to the home screen, and we should have our new applications, with the one that we need the most here being Ensō. So if you are all ready to go, press X, open up Ensō, and make sure yet again you understand the terms right here associated with this application. Now for our options, there's obviously the top one, which is to install or reinstall the Ensō hack, and that is exactly what we want to do. So once you're all ready to go ahead and continue along with this and get Ensō installed. At this point, you must reboot your system, so press any button to reboot the system. Now, if you notice, once your console reboots, you're not going to see the PlayStation logo, you're instead going to see the Ensō logo on screen. And if you see this, then congratulations, that means your system has successfully been modified and is now in a modified state from a cold boot. Now what exactly does this mean? Check this out. Just like magic, I've just started up the system, and if I go down to, let's say, Vita Shell and run it, I can wait a few seconds, and Vita Shell opens up. I did not have to open up Molecular Shell and do an install. I did not have to do h-encore. I didn't have to do any of that. At this point, our system is modded from the moment we turn it on, which is exactly what we are looking for. So now I've had you open up Vita Shell because there is another thing that we need to do here. So for this, we can go to the UX0 directory, and you're going to want to look for a tie folder. And if you see this tie folder, you want to press triangle on it, and you want to delete it. Again, you want to delete the tie folder in UX0 specifically. And if it asks if you want to delete this folder, you're going to press X on yes. And make sure it deletes. Next up, let's go ahead, exit out of Vita Shell. We're going to go over to our settings. And up at the top, we should have HENkaku settings, just like we see here. Inside of HENkaku settings, we have PSN spoofing enabled, enable unsafe homebrew, enable version spoofing, and here when it says spoofed version, you want to go in here, and this is your system firmware version that we are spoofing to. So for example, right now, if we are on firmware 3.60 and the latest PSN update is 3.73, you can change this to 3.73, press R2, and go back out of this. And when we restart our system, we will have that spoofed. I'll actually even reboot the device just to show you all. So we've just restarted the system, and as an example, we can go over to settings, and HENkaku settings still shows up, but more importantly, we can go over to system, go into system information, and as you can see, this is 3.60 with HENkaku enabled. Now that is definitely not the latest system version. However, if I go over to the PlayStation Store and attempt to access it here, let's wait a few moments. And as you can see, because 3.73 is the current release while I am recording this, we are able to access the PlayStation Network store with no issue. And that's one way you can tell that it's working. So now, awesome. At this point, we have our system downgraded. We have permanent HENkaku set up. We know how to install HomeBrew, but what else on here? Well, another really important part of owning a modified Vita is plugins. And you might not get that far without plugins, unfortunately. But either way, that is exactly why we installed AutoPlugin 2. So from here, you can go ahead, fire up AutoPlugin 2, and let's see how it works. Now check this out. We can go into Vita plugins, go to install plugins, and there's going to be a few plugins that I would recommend to any Vita owner. The first one here being h-encore². And while you are setting this up, I'd recommend looking in the top right corner and make sure that is set to UR0. We had to delete the TIE folder in UX0 so we can set everything to UR0. But the first thing we should do is load up h-encore² and set this. You can just select one of these here and press X, and as you can see, it's been installed. h-encore² will allow us to play games that require a higher firmware than 3.60, whether they be digital or physical or even DLC. So if you're planning on playing a bunch of games on your Vita, you really need h-encore². And any plugins that have been installed also show a nice little green light on the right side once they've been set up. If you want something such as a custom warning on your system, you can set that up with custom warning v2. Another one I really highly recommend is no NP DRM. If you have any DLC or any games, physical or digital, that have been backed up, they would be in the no NP DRM type setup. I have a full video covering how you can dump your games to no NP DRM standard, but in order to play those games, you will need to have the plugin. So yet again, just like any other plugin, you can press the X button on that, and there. Now any game backups you try and install and play on your Vita that are set up with no NP DRM will work just fine. Now as you can see, there's just an absolute ton here that are available with AutoPlugin 2, but those are probably the two most important ones in my opinion. That way you have backup loading enabled, and you can play games that require a higher firmware. So if a game just came out, let's say 6 months ago, and you want to play it on your system, you should be able to with h-encore². If you ever want to uninstall a plugin, you can press the circle button, go to uninstall plugins, and do the exact same thing right here. Now you can check out all the other ones, like if you ever want to set up SD to Vita, you can use this here. If you want to do the PSP plugins, you do need Adrenaline first, but you can get those in place as well too. And even the extras, you can check out all of this if you really wish to. Now with all of that set up here, we can go down to exit, and it will restart the system in order to take our plugins. Now, another thing that I recommend here is the Vita Homebrew browser. I really like this just because it's simple to use and it's a really awesome way to get a lot of homebrew. I'm showing this here because you might stay at this black screen for a while the first time you boot it up. If so, nothing to worry about, just wait a few minutes here and let it do its thing. Now, as you can see, the Vita Homebrew browser is working and available. And if you want to check out anything here, you can simply just fire up whatever piece of homebrew you're looking to get, and from here you can download it, and it should be able to install just fine on your system as long as you have the storage available. Last but not least, if you're wanting to free up some storage here, you can delete a few applications. If you have not already deleted h-encore or h-encore², you're not going to need that, so you can go ahead and get rid of that. If you want to get rid of Madoru, that's fine as well too. At this point, we've already downgraded our system, and we're going to delete that big update file in the process. However, as for anything else, Ensō I would still kind of recommend keeping here just in case you ever need to uninstall it or what have you, but this should be fine. It's really going to be optional if you want to get rid of it or not. But that is about it. So now it doesn't look like there's all too much I've shown you here at the end, but trust me, you're just getting started at this point. From here, if you want to go anywhere else, you can learn on this channel how to back up your games and play them, get them all set up with no NP DRM. You can unlock the PSP emulator that is built into the system using Adrenaline, which I highly recommend doing that. And of course, if you are kind of struggling for storage here, you can use Storage Manager to set up a SD to Vita on your system and therefore be able to use a cheaper and much bigger micro SD card on your PSTV or even your PlayStation Vita. There's just so much that you can do with this awesome system, so this is just the beginning right here for you, but you have a solid foundation if you have successfully followed this tutorial to the end. Anyways, that's about it for this video. I really hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope it helped out. If it did, a like would absolutely be appreciated, and if you didn't like this, well, that's fine. A dislike is fine as well, too. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone.